WHGE 95.3 FM coming up, the Open Eye.
Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or ego diddling. We do so because the chains of oppression on our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove.
Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm your host, Third Eye Optometrist, Patrice Gibbs, here to get that third eye open. Yes, indeed, I got a lot for you today. Hey, Steve, how you doing? First, I'm going to start off with a little public announcement. Today is the 29th annual African American Family Festival and Parade at Kirkwood Park. Starts at noon. I will be heading over there. Please join me. Okay, let me get my disclaimer out the way right quick. Hey, Sherry, I see you, sister.
The views and opinions expressed on Open Eye are those of the host, guests, and contributors, and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual.
All right. Moving right along. Move that there. Hold on, give me a second, y'all. All right. Yeah, we got that. Here. All right. Every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. And considering what's going on out here these days, the things that we need to know. First of all, we need to know who we're dealing with. We definitely need to know that, hey, Vaughn, let me tell you something. This wasn't just about survival. What am I talking about? It was about arousal. How many of us don't know this? We need to know. When Nat Turner was executed, they didn't merely kill him. They desecrated him. His body was boiled down into grease and sold in jars, like souvenirs. His skull was passed from hand to hand for nearly 2 centuries, treated as a family heirloom. One white man even fashioned a money purse from Turner's skin. And that wasn't the only one. After lynchings, white mobs carved up the dead. They cut off genitals, roasted black flesh over open flames, and sometimes fed it to their children. Wonder why they have a taste for blood? Family posed for smiling photographs beneath swinging, mutilated bodies, immortalizing horror as if it were a picnic. This was not random cruelty, it was ritual. It was not merely terror, it was obsession. White men both feared and envied black strength. They sexualized it, fetishized it, and sought to consume it. Literally. Devouring black flesh, especially the private parts, became an act of humiliation, domination, and twisted arousal. They called it justice, but it was sadism wrapped in the cloak of law and religion. Hey, Rhonda, I see you. This is a history they want erased. This is what today's lawmakers are banning from classrooms. They want your children to believe slavery was just about working the fields or picking cotton. They want to sanitize atrocity, burying the evidence of ritualized violence and sexual sadism that define white supremacy. But the truth cannot be buried. The truth is that the obsession of black people was never only about labor. It was about domination of the body, spirit, and very humanity. And until this truth is taught, acknowledged, and confronted, the scars will remain and the lies will fester. Open Eye, WHGE 95.3 FM. All right. Patrice Gibbs here. You know, something that often comes up in this political environment, this social construct that we are dealing with right now, is that we often have to warn people that we are not our ancestors. Sometimes that warning doesn't really hold validity. We say that to say that we will strike back. Okay? Remind them that, you know, you're a fearless leader, fearful leader, the orange disaster, the tangerine wannabe tyrant has security. You don't. Now, like I said, the thing about that is it gives the impression that our ancestors didn't fight back. It's from Brother Hamid. We always hear this question from others about why didn't the African fight back against slavery? The slavery that was done by kidnapping, enslaving, and murdering our children, brutalizing those captured in the worst of ways during our Ma'afa Holocaust. That's the same question our children wonder too, since they never hear the other side of the story. Resistance. That is our story. While some narratives of slavery focus on the subjugation of Africans, it's profound misrepresentation to claim they didn't fight back. Resistance was a constant and multifaceted element of the African experience during the transatlantic slave trade and throughout the period of chattel slavery. And this resistance took many forms, from overt acts of rebellion to subtle everyday defiance. Comparing African and European conflicts highlights the distinct approaches to warfare and the complex political landscape of the time. While European powers engaged in large-scale state-sponsored wars with formalized armies and defined battlefields, many African societies were organized differently. Warfare was often about resource control, territorial disputes, and the capture of captives, which could be used as laborers or sold. This pre-existing system of warfare was exploited by European slave traders who offered firearms in exchange for captives. escalating conflicts and destabilizing regions. However, as the slave trade intensified, African kingdoms and people began to actively resist European encroachment and the slave trade itself. For instance, the Kingdom of Congo under King Afonso I initially engaged with the Portuguese, but later tried to limit the slave trade, expressing concern over the depopulation of his kingdom. He wrote to the Portuguese king condemning the trade's brutality. Similarly, Queen Nzinga in present-day Angola was a fierce and cunning military leader who spent decades fighting against Portuguese colonization and the slave trade in the 17th century. She formed alliances with other African states and even the Dutch to weaken her enemies. Now, these examples show that resistance wasn't just a reaction to being enslaved, it was also a preemptive struggle to protect sovereignty and prevent the destruction of African societies. And you had here in the States, many of you probably haven't heard of the Stono Rebellion. The Stono Rebellion stands as one of the most significant slave revolts in colonial America. It was in 1739. A powerful testament to the organized and strong nature of African resistance. It began on September 9th, 1739 in the British colony of South Carolina. The rebellion's leader was a literate slave, or a literate a prisoner of war, because that's what it was, who along with 20 other enslaved people stole weapons from a store near the Stono River. Their goal was freedom in Spanish Florida, where the Spanish authorities had offered liberty to slaves who escaped from the British colonies. Marching south, the group grew in number, killing white colonizers and recruiting more captured Africans. They reportedly carried banners and chanted liberty. By the end of the day, the group had swelled to over 60 people and killed more than 20 colonizers. Of course, it was eventually suppressed by well-armed militia. Many of the rebels were captured and executed. But the Stono Rebellion sent shockwaves through the South, leading to the enactment of the Negro Act of 1740, a series of harsh laws designed to restrict the movement, assembly, and education of enslaved people. This act, while a direct result of the rebellion, also proved the colonizers' deep fear of further uprisings and their recognition that Africans were not passive victims. We fought back. We still need to fight back. Don't get it mixed. We are still at war with these colonizers. WHGE 95.3 FM. Open eye. All right. Patrice Gibbs, third eye optometrist here. This is from Andrew Sullivan. Correctly stating, there's effectively no Republican Party anymore. There's a radical movement to destroy the modern American state and eviscerate its institutions in favor of restoring a mythical Elysian majority white 19th century past. And that's what they want to do. You talk about they want to turn back the clock, make America great again. You know, whenever that comes up, we have some people that correctly point out, when was it great? When was it great? See, because nobody voted for Donald Trump because they thought he was a skilled communicator or a charismatic leader or a creative problem solver or a brilliant intellect or a selfless humanitarian. He was none of those things. It's amazing that he's able to convince people to follow him. The thing is, this barely literate, racist bastard speaks on about a 6th grade level. And those that follow him fall right in line. He said if he ever ran for office, he would run as a Republican because it's so goddamn dumb. Yeah, they voted for him because he hates the same people they hate. After Jason Bateman had it right, it's time to start calling out his voters as well as him. So he said, not him. Trump voters just increased the deficit by $5 trillion. Trump voters just deported a kid with cancer. Trump voters just approved kicking 13 million people off health insurance. Trump voters are excited about selling off our public lands. So you don't let them hide behind their votes. They knew what they were voting for, and they are responsible for the consequences. They knew exactly what they were voting for. That's right. Increased the deficit by $5 trillion. Yeah. Actually exciting. And this idea that some people have that, you know, we got to all come together. We got to reach across the aisle. You know, no. Well, when people realize how they screwed up, we gotta forgive them and welcome them back in the fold. My ass. You voted for hatred and oppression. That's unforgivable. You don't get to come back. And I say the same thing to these black conservatives, these black MAGA fools. Like the one was on that Jubilee debating, there's 20 of them actually on there, debating Amanda Seals. I don't know why you did that, Amanda. You know, you need to tune into the open eye and hear me when I say, don't debate with these ninjas that Harriet Tubman would have shot. No, they don't get to come back to the barbecue. No, Candace Owens will not be forgiven. You effed up. And you stay your ass over there. WHGE 95.3 FM. The Open Eye. All right. Patrice Gibbs here with you. You know, I often say this, the Democrats need to get some fire up under their ass. They do. They need to fight fire with fire. Beyond stand up. It's beyond standing up now. All right? It's about bringing a gun to the gunfight. Understand who you're dealing with. And I tell you one that's fighting fire with fire is Governor Newsom. This was a post he put up. And check him out. Big mistake by Dozy Don. Space Command belongs in California, not Alabama. A total disaster of a state. Everyone knows San Francisco is the future home of Starfleet Academy. Yeah, live long and prosper. Do that Balkan. He goes on to say, that's because California is #1 for aerospace, #1 for technology, #1 for AI, artificial intelligence. Very smart people, much smarter than J.D. Just Dance Vance, who has a low IQ. Oh yeah, he called them out. He telling it like it is. That's the kind of stuff you need to hear. Because J.D. Vance is not a smart dude. He said low IQ. And a punk too. Yeah, he ain't got no backbone like the rest of them. San Francisco is the best in the world for engineering and innovation, rockets, software, and the startups. Alabama's governor, Crazy K, has no idea what's going on. Just like Little Hands, you know who he's talking about. She is slow and burps a lot. She's done nothing for her people and made the state very unsafe. A murder rate 190% higher than California's. Space Command must be here in California, the greatest state in America, with me, the young, beautiful Governor Gavin C. Newsom. The sleepy golfer in the White House didn't move it here. He has Newsom derangement syndrome. Just sad. Yeah, see, that's the kind of fire you need to bring. Call these fools out. Yeah, that's what you got to do. You gotta call these fools out. Like, what's this chick's name? And I'm going to come back to this, Governor Newsom, but maybe I better go there. Hold on, y'all. Wait a minute. Yeah. Okay. Governor Newsom recently highlighted a fact that Republicans don't want to talk about. Homicide rates in many Republican-led states are far higher than in California. So he's sending out these National Guards to these blue states and cities that are majority black. But Texas, these red states, Texas, their homicide rate is 140% higher than California. Oklahoma, 150% higher. Arkansas, 220% higher. Louisiana, 380% higher the homicide rate. Damn, y'all, it ain't safe in Louisiana. South Carolina, 220% higher. Alaska, 170% higher. Tennessee, 20% higher. Alabama, 290% higher. And Mississippi, 380% higher. What does this tell us? It tells us, one, if anywhere the National Guard needs to go is to these red states. Two, stay your black ass out of these states. Now here's the hypocrisy. Despite these alarming numbers, the orange disaster, and the grift old party, the Republicans continue to focus their attacks on Democratic-led cities and states. Little Hands, as Newsom calls him, even threatens to send the National Guard into places like California, Chicago, and New York, while ignoring the reality that homicide rates are significantly worse in all these red states. The bottom line, the data that Newsom shared is accurate and exposes the double standard. The Trump regime and the grifter leadership want to paint Democratic states as uniquely violent, but the truth is that Republican-led states are facing even higher levels of violence. Instead of dealing with the real issues in their own backyards, they choose political theater. Because acknowledging these facts would mean admitting that their tough on crime rhetoric is built on hypocrisy, elitism, and racism. Jennifer Welch, she nailed it. She's from Oklahoma, the state that decided to require that all public schools from grade 5 to 12 teach the Bible as a foundational historical document, and to have a physical copy of the Bible, the Ten Commandments, the Constitution, and the Declaration of Independence in every classroom. Had the Ten Commandments in the Bible in every classroom. Like, that's going to make a difference in the violence in that area. Because it didn't make a bit of goddamn difference out of your church, did it? This mandate aims to incorporate Christian teachings into the curriculum and promote the Bible as central to understanding American history and values. The standards require students to identify Christian influences on the founding fathers and treat biblical accounts like the book of Exodus as a historical fact. People were crazy. Jennifer Welch, like I said, she nailed it. She said, as someone who lives in the red state, let me just tell you what MAGA supermajorities get you. Oklahoma, 50th in education. That means they're last. The worst in the whole country for women to live. Oklahoma is poor, worse health care, and if you look at the bottom 10 states, they're all MAGA supermajorities. These policies hurt people. They use people's faith to lure them in and say, oh, we're family values. They ain't no damn values. And then they don't vote to help women have children. And they don't vote for health care. They don't vote for child care. And they demean the poor. As a matter of fact, most of these states are pushing to outlaw poverty and homelessness. So why would they do that? Because slavery was abolished except if you're duly convicted of a crime, and they're going to put your ass in one of these private prisons and put you out in the field picking cotton. Y'all better wake up. WHGE 95.3 FM. The Open Eye. All right. Patrice Gibbs here. All right. Meanwhile, what's going on? What's going on? Well, America is showing itself to be America. For instance, in Chicago, a black Chicago cop says colleagues sent him a racist image of a black man with a gun in his mouth after he dared to defend a pregnant woman against abuse. That's the kind of stuff gangs do. The gang in blue. In the eyes of his fellow Chicago police officer Anthony Banks, did the unthinkable by intervening on behalf of a pregnant woman who was being assaulted and harassed by another cop. That same cop and other cops then retaliated against the black police officer back at the station, surrounding him and preventing him from walking away while calling him racial slurs. This was in the police station, telling him to go back where he came from. That's according to a lawsuit that's been filed in federal court against those cops and obtained by Atlanta Black Star. When Banks reported the incident to a commanding officer, the lieutenant dismissed his concerns, telling Banks that the other cops were angry at him because he intervened on behalf of the pregnant woman. The lieutenant ordered Banks to leave his shift early, but then called him as he was driving home to return to the station to fill out a form documenting the alleged intimidation. But that document was leaked online by an unknown Chicago police officer. That's what the claim states. And the intimidation continued the following day after one of the cops emailed him a racist image on his department-issued phone. The image depicted a caricature of an African-American man with a gun in his mouth. And it read, when is an N-word the most frustrated? When he's trying to blow his own brains out. Chicago attorney Blake Wolf Horowitz described the image to local media as something from Mississippi during the 1950s, which is when and where 14-year-old Emmett Till was visiting from Chicago when a white mob lynched him after a white woman falsely accused him of whistling at her. The image is the most racially perverse photograph of how an African American can kill himself. It is a 1950s Mississippi style representation. That's where they want us back. You gotta wonder about any black man that joins any police force. The FBI said that white supremacy has invaded police forces all over the country. Are you kidding? Police forces are white supremacists. Just by policy and practice. And when they start letting black people in, they let them know. You don't go along with the program, we'll come after you. Now, Banks was transferred to another department in the 6th District. The 6th District patrols Chicago's Auburn Grissom neighborhood, which is more than 10 miles from Hobolt Park neighborhood, where the police from the 11th District patrol, where he was originally from. And of course, the Chicago Police Department has a long history of racism towards citizens and its own officers. And last week, Atlanta Black Star reported on an off-duty Chicago cop who was arrested in Arizona for chirping his tires. What the hell? Like I said, what's going on? Because this shows how comfortable they are in their racism. They came after this cop to intimidate him right in the police station. Now, furthermore, what's going on? Tell your children be careful who they hang out with. Okay? You might have been cool in school and this, that, and the other. Be careful who you hang out with and where you go with certain people, especially palm-colored people. Because the family of a black boy who was beaten by a group of young white teenagers in a bar has retained legal representation to demand a hate crime investigation into the attack. There's a video that shows several white teens grabbing a 14-year-old boy and pushing him against farm equipment in a bar before beating him and slamming him on the ground. One person behind the camera is heard saying, "F that engine," that N-word. Another person is also heard saying the N-word as the attack ensues. This took place at an underage drinking party in a barn in the rural town of Pulaski, Wisconsin. Cell phone footage of the attack went viral and sparked outrage on social media and demands accountability. After local authorities interviewed the victim and gathered witnesses' accounts, they determined the attack was not racially motivated. but was triggered by an alleged ongoing dispute between the victim and his assailants connected to prior allegations of assault, attempted theft, and threats. What a crock. You talk about BS. Local authorities determined the attack was not racially motivated as they beat him and called him the N-word. It was not emotionally motivated, my ass. The attorney for the victim's family disputed the conclusion that the attack wasn't racially motivated. When a black teenager is targeted, beaten, and subjected to racial epithets, that's a hate crime. This case is about accountability, protecting children, and ensuring equal protection under the law. Anything less sends the wrong message to victims and emboldens perpetrators of hate. And they could care less. One black male witness wrote a statement to the sheriff's office saying he helped break up the fight and that he never heard any non-black people at the party use the N-word. You effing coon. The witness said the fight stemmed from previous confrontations. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Can't stomach it. It was about this next generation of colonizers showing you that they have learned white supremacy well. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Hey, Jakeem, I see you, brother. Yep, the customary lies. WHGE 95.3 FM. Patrice Gibbs, back with you on the Open Eye. It's something I said. Orange Disaster wants to send out these National Guards. Okay, send the National Guards to Chicago. But when you send them there, send them to the police force. Make them follow the police force around and make sure they don't brutalize people, because that's their practice. You come to Philadelphia, they got something for your ass. Because Philadelphia's superstar Democratic District Attorney Larry Krasner, that's what the Occupy Democrats call it. I don't know about all the superstar stuff. But anyway, he lays out a brilliant playbook for arresting and prosecuting the Orange Disaster's regime's fascist ICE agents and troops as the MAGA crackdown spiraled out of control. This plan even undermines the presidential pardon. Okay? Yeah. If you want to have a group of ICE agents, or you even had the military coming into Philadelphia and they're committing crimes, they're committing assaults that are illegal, homicides that are illegal, they're kidnapping people, they're engaging in unlawful restraint, which is a crime in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Krasner said. They're obstructing the administration of justice, he continued. If you have people coming in, military, ICE, whoever it is, acting beyond their legal authority, they can be prosecuted, assuming they commit crimes in state court. And they cannot be pardoned by the president, which means that they get to tell a Philadelphia jury exactly why it is they thought they could come invade this city, and they get to bear the consequences, whether they are in handcuffs, a jury trial, or a jail sentence. That is exactly the kind of hardline approach we need from all of our Democratic leaders. Trump and his minions are breaking the law at every turn, and it's time that we started holding them accountable. These mass ICE agents think they're above the law as they work to build a MAGA dystopia. They're in for a rude awakening. By prosecuting any lawbreakers on the state level, Democrats can circumvent the presidential pardon, which has been irreparably corrupted by Trump. He demonstrated a willingness to abuse it for purely political purposes with his mass pardon of the January 6th insurrectionists. Any plan for fighting back against these Republican criminals must factor in that reality. Yes, indeed. That's the way you got to handle that mess. Yeah. All right. Let's see what's this here. Yeah. See, I see why reading was illegal for our people during slavery. Because we discovered that we think in words. The more words you know, the more things you can think about. Reading was illegal because if you limit someone's vocabulary, you limit their thoughts. They can't even think of the concept of freedom because they don't have the language to do so. This is why you got to read and think. And then you can look up things like this. This is from LBJ. My friends, you do not wipe away the scars of centuries by uttering a few words. Now you are free. Free to walk where you will. Free to do as you desire. Free to choose the leaders you please. No. Freedom declared on paper is not the same as justice delivered in life. You cannot take a man who has been chained at the ankles, who has been whipped and hobbled and held back for generations, unshackle him one morning, lead him to the starting line of a race, and say, run now, compete with everyone else. The contest is fair. That is not fairness. It is cruelty dressed as equality. For the truth is this: centuries of stolen labor cannot be repaid by a single stroke of a pen. Generations denied learning cannot be made whole by the mere opening of a schoolhouse door. Communities stripped of wealth, of land, of dignity cannot be restored simply because the law now says they are citizens. This is the deeper, more difficult stage of the struggle. The first was for freedom. The second for equality under the law. But now comes the greatest challenge of all: to make equality real, to make opportunity tangible, to make justice visible, not as a theory, but as a fact, as a result, as the lived experience of every man, woman, and child. We seek not only the absence of change, but the presence of opportunity. We seek not just the right to enter the schoolhouse, but the means to learn and to thrive. We seek not merely equality as an ideal, but equality as bread on the table, as a decent job, as dignity in the workplace, as safety in the streets, as a vote that counts in a future that belongs to us. This, my friends, is the unfinished work of democracy. Freedom is the first step. Justice is the journey. Equality, in fact, and opportunity is in result. That is the destination. See, LBJ, that's LBJ. He was the last of the New Dealers. I really believe, and I said this before, if it were not for Nam, if he hadn't have got fooled by the military-industrial complexes, he hadn't allowed them to play on his ego, he would have went down as one of the greatest presidents since Roosevelt. WHGE, probably greater than Roosevelt because of Roosevelt's racism. WHGE 95.3 FM, Open Eye. Make sure here. Yeah, I'm still here. I'll be right with you. All right. All right. WHGE 95.3 FM, Open Eye. Yeah, it amazes me that I see. I guess I shouldn't really be amazed by it because, this is what they do. You get in office, and I'm talking about black Democrats that support Israel. It kind of blows my mind. And how we don't seem to understand how we got there, how Israel got there, how this came about. Let me quote Jorge the Vanguard. You want to hear somebody talk bad about white people? Check out Jorge the Vanguard. He ain't no joke. Jorge the Vanguard says, Europeans coughed up Zionism. Europeans coughed up Zionism the way their inbred monarchies coughed up hemophilia. Like a genetic curse born of cousins marrying cousins in lice-infested castles. Zionism wasn't some grand liberation. It was Europe trying to spit its centuries of anti-Semitic slime into someone else's backyard. For 1,000 years, these dandruff-drenched degenerates forced Jews into ghettos that reeked like their own unwashed bodies. Shaved their heads while never washing their own. Burned them in the streets, then acted shocked when the Jewish question still lingered. And when the Holocaust, Europe's ultimate invention, mass industrial slaughter, left them drowning in guilt, they didn't take responsibility. They didn't hand over Berlin, Vienna, or London for reparations. No. They did what Europe always does when its piles get too high. They deported the problem because deportation is Europe's love language. European Americans understand that. Can't feed your peasants? Ship them to the colonies. Can't stand your prisoners? Dump them in Australia. Couldn't handle Jews in your midst? Shove Zionism down Palestine's throat. It's the same colonial trick every time. Europe coughs up its garbage and forces someone else to choke on it. And look at the state of the people coughing it up. These were enlightened, civilized masterminds. These were people whose families reeked of incest, whose nobles picked lice from each other's wigs, whose peasants bathed once a year, if that, and whose cities were open sores of plague and feces. Out of that swamp of syphilis and scabies, Zionism was born. Not as a salvation, but as phlegmy hack spat into the heart of the Middle East. The audacity is breathtaking. Europe butchered Jews for centuries, then turned around and said, "Here, Palestine, you deal with it." Imagine torching your neighbor's house and then tossing the ashes onto the stranger's garden. That's Zionism. Europe created the wound, then exported the infection. The Crusades, colonialism, the slave trade, fascism, apartheid, Zionism is just the newest tumor on Europe's diseased body. So when they say Zionism is about safety, remember, nothing Europe produces is about safety. It's about the survival of Europe at everyone else's expense. The monarchs couldn't keep their bloodlines free of cousin marrying. The peasants couldn't keep their scalps free of fleas. And the continent as a whole couldn't keep its hands free of genocide. Zionism is just Europe's cough, Europe's sneeze, Europe's vomit all over Palestine. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. Yeah. All right. Listen. It's something that in America, there's over 400 years of documented torture, rape, murder, terrorism committed by Caucasians, but yet blacks are labeled as having violent tendencies. Let's look at the historical context here. Slavery. The institution of chattel slavery was inherently violent. It involved the forced transportation of millions of Africans to the Americas. The system was maintained through brutal methods, including physical torture, beatings, family separation, sexual violence against enslaved men, women, and children. And these acts were not isolated incidents, but they were integral to the economic and social structure of the time. The violence was systemic and legally sanctioned. See, don't get it mixed about these colonizers. Oh, the Puritans came over to America and discovered America, and they were some people that were getting tired of the oppression in Europe. BS. They were kicked the F out of Europe. Because as bad as the Europeans were, these people that they kicked out were worse, and they had to get rid of their ass. From slavery, we moved on to post-Reconstruction era. Jim Crow times. After the Civil War and into slavery, violence against black Americans continued in new forms. But blacks are labeled as having violent tendencies. The Reconstruction era saw backlash from white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, who used terror tactics, including lynching, bombings, and public beatings, to intimidate black people and prevent them from exercising their newfound rights, such as voting. And they still don't want us to vote. This era was characterized by legal segregation, Jim Crow, and the systemic disenfranchisement of black communities. Lynchings in particular were a widespread and public form of terror. usually attended by large crowds and used to enforce racial hierarchy and intimidation, but blacks are labeled as having violent tendencies. Systemic and state-sanctioned violence against black Americans has also been perpetrated by state and federal authorities. This includes police brutality, which has a long history in the U.S. dating back to the slave patrols. The use of excessive force, police killings, and targeting of black communities by law enforcement are issues that have been documented for decades and are central to modern social movements like Black Lives Matter. The criminal justice system itself is often cited as a site of systemic violence, with a disproportionate number of black people incarcerated and facing harsher sentences than their white counterparts for similar crimes. How many black people, Sandra Bland, have we seen taken prisoner and murdered, like the brother in upstate New York who was beaten to death by the correction officers? But yet blacks are labeled as having violent tendencies. It comes from the historical stereotypes, because during this era of slavery and throughout Jim Crow period, racist caricatures and stereotypes were used to justify racial oppression. Black people were often depicted as lazy, ignorant, hypersexual, and inherently criminal or violent. These stereotypes serve to dehumanize black people and make it easier to justify their subjugation, and the violence committed against them. The media has played a significant role in perpetrating these stereotypes. For much of the 20th century, black men in particular were often portrayed in the news and entertainment as criminals or threats. This has contributed to a public perception that associates blackness with criminality and violence, regardless of statistical realities. The myth of black-on-black crime. The concept of black-on-black crime is often brought up in discussions about racial violence. However, this framing is misleading. Criminology shows that most violent crime is intraracial, meaning that victims and perpetrators tend to be of the same race. The same patterns exist within white communities, Asian communities, and so on. The reason the black-on-black crime narrative is so prominent is that it often is used to deflect or dismiss discussions about systemic racism and police brutality, shifting the blame for violence on the black communities themselves. A black-on-black crime, let's talk about white-on-black crime, white-on-everyone else crime. But blacks are labeled as having violent tendencies. See, and there are other factors: the lack of resources, underfunded schools, food deserts, and a lack of mental health and social services in marginalized communities. There's mass incarceration, policies that led to the disproportionate imprisonment of black individuals, which destabilizes black families and communities. The history of the United States includes a long documented record of systemic violence, terror, and abuse perpetrated by white individuals and institutions against black communities. The perception of black people as having violent tendencies is a harmful stereotype rooted in this history, perpetrated by media portrayals and cultural narratives, and used to justify ongoing racial disparities and systemic injustices. It misrepresents the true causes of violence, which are tied to socio-economic conditions and systemic inequalities, rather than race. Poverty breeds crime, crime breeds violence. And that's true in your community as well as ours. But y'all don't get that. But black people are accused of having violent tendencies, which is why we need Pan-Africanism. Because right now they're trying to accuse Ibrahim Touré of Burkina Faso of being a violent dictator against his own people. Is BS. Why Pan-Africanism? Pan-Africanism is the vision of uniting African people everywhere on the continent and throughout the diaspora. Why Pan-Africanism matters. Economic sovereignty. Control of Africa's resources mean the ability to feed, clothe, house, and employ its people instead of enriching foreign empires. With Africa's wealth, global dependency has to stop. Africa is the most resource-rich landmass on the planet. Modern capitalism and industrialization and imperialism and the global supply chains are deeply dependent on extraction of African resources, from gold to oil to cobalt to uranium. Why Pan-Africanism matters. Political power. United Africa can stand as a global bloc, reshaping international policy rather than being dictated to by former colonizers. Liberation beyond Africa. The freedom of African people globally is tied to the liberation of Africa itself. When Africa rises, African descendants everywhere rise. Liberation requires unity. Fragmented struggles cannot break the global system of exploitation. A united Africa politically, economically, culturally, globally will shift the balance of global power and secure dignity for African people everywhere. Here's some of the goals. I think this is the main goal, is to establish a unified military or security force that puts African leaders in a position to say, don't touch my people over here in the diaspora. And that's right. Protect their sovereignty and resources from external interference. This unity is seen as key to ending the oppression of African people everywhere. By liberating Africa from foreign control and exploitation, Pan-Africanism aims to create a prosperous, sovereign continent that can empower all its people, both on the continent and in the diaspora. This is Open Eye, WHGE 95.3 FM. All right. Thanks for joining me on Open Eye. Hope you learned something, because I learned something before I got here. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. This has been Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. All right. I always tell you, global African supremacy, it's on the way. It's on the way. We have no choice. The survival of Mother Earth depends on it. Peace.